One way that I do not want it to change, however, and this is not so much applies to me, but certainly would apply to areas like mine if you replaced England with Wales. And it is this headline which broke in GB News recently, which is the exact opposite of what needs to happen. But again, it's more of a war on the country that is Great Britain, war on the country that is United Kingdom and its associated nations, right? England, Scotland, Wales, and again, Ireland as part of like the British Isles, if you will, even though again, you say it's part of, Great Britain, or you say it's part of the United Kingdom. There's a lot of, hissy-fissy stuff there, right? As we know, right? So I'm not saying that, but it's part of the British Isles, right? But it says here, rural England is too white, quote unquote, and needs more halal food, says the Centre for Hate Studies. And that should tell you everything you need to know, ladies and gentlemen. One of these radically left, as part of this Britain's rural racists, quote unquote, this radical left Centre for Hate studies. You can see what the ideological bent on it just by the name. You don't need to know anything more about it than that. But it says here, the British countryside has been labelled as overwhelmingly white, meaning that, oh no, too many British people live there, right? And slated for not having enough halal food options in new report. Because funnily enough, most people who live in the English or in the British, such as in the Welsh countryside, they're not Muslims. So why would they need halal food options? Many of them are either not really that religious, kind of irreligious, or probably mostly Christian, right? Probably mostly Christian. So as a result, why are they going to eat something from a religion which would be prohibited? Right? Why would they be adopting a foreign religious custom which would be prohibited under said religion? Many people, again, they're irreligious. They're not going to really care so much where their food is coming from, just that it's on their plate and cooked the way that they like it. Again, this is more of a wider colonization effort that has been slowly creeping across England, and it's going to come. There was the clip that came up, I think it was on GB News, one of the, again, prominent race activists, I've forgotten her name, but I think she got into an argument with a Welsh farmer saying that, the countryside is racist, it needs more diversity, and the farmer was like, no it doesn't, it's just our home and we cultivated this land for generations, it's our land. And again, it's just all this, it's a land grab, it's a power grab by people that really, if they're sharing this worldview, they shouldn't be here. But again, sort of dubious then when you look at how immigration has worked, at least over the last, again, 15 years or more, really losing the case for why they should even be allowed to remain here. In many instances, not only are they saying they want to take over all the positions of power and rule us with the whip, okay, turn us from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe, right, quite literally in many instances. But they, again, saying that we're bad persons if we object to that. And again, they're not only losing the claim based on what they want to do, but they're losing the claim based on that, do they really have any right to be here in the first place? In many ways, I would argue no. In many ways, I would argue no. And again, of course, it's coming up from one of these hyper-woke liberal University of Leicester Centre for Hate Studies. We now have studies into hate as if hate can be classified as an objective thing, right? So you have physiology studies, you have biology studies, you have astrophysics studies, all of these things that study a particular domain. But now they're trying to make it so that you can study something like hate, right? Hate, which is this nebulous concept because, again, it depends on the individual. It's a subjective thing, right? Because different people hate different things for different reasons. So it cannot be an objective thing. So you cannot really study it in an objective manner. And this is where all your taxpayer money is going funding these public education institutions, ladies and gentlemen, which is why you should think, as the residents of Epping are doing, about not paying certain taxes where possible. The residents of Epping, in response to the court decision to force them to accept these foreign invaders back into the Bell Hotel, have vowed not to pay their council tax, which I 110% fully support them doing. And apparently this University of Leicester Centre for Hate Studies has highlighted a number of challenges faced by those from ethnic minority backgrounds in the countryside. Yeah, they're facing challenges for the way the countryside works, not really providing a good case for integration and assimilation, is it? If the countryside then needs to change to fit them, well, they're not doing a very good job of fitting into the culture that we supposedly, again, should be welcoming them into. So again, but by definition, if they're coming in and changing the way that something works, they're not assimilating it, they're taking it over. So again, why should we be making these accommodations in what is our land and our home, and is the only home that we have and likely will ever have with the collapse of the empire, right? Obviously. rural Britain's, quote, overwhelming, unquote, whiteness causes, quote, discomfort and a psychological burden to people from different minority groups trying to navigate, quote unquote, white spaces, the report claims. I would argue that even if you were to talk to a lot of these people, especially, people of different descent that are more conservative in the way that they think, they probably think that these people are chatting nonsense, because this is pure white savior nonsense coming from the very woke liberal establishment lines, basically. Again, white spaces. What is a white space? No, the countryside is just the countryside. It just is. It's not a white space. You go to the countryside in many areas of Africa, that is just not, it's not a black space, it's just a space. But funnily enough, there are certain sects out in South Africa in particular that are struggling to navigate what you might call black spaces under the threat of genocide. Would you say that? Oh no, the Center for Hate Studies would never say that. Of course they're not. It's only okay when it's white people that are on the receiving end of the whip, never holding it. Of course, we still have that loaded over us, despite the fact that we spent many, many lives and much in terms of fiscal resource to free and eradicate slavery, right? And was the premier force at doing so, largely because of our Christian morals at the time, which are now again being used to say that, oh no, this is how they justified slavery. Well, no, it's actually the way that they justified the abolition also. The academics, these quote-unquote academics, have also claimed that pub culture and other monocultural customs in rural areas are not inclusive. They are actually inclusive if you want to integrate into the culture, right? They actually are very inclusive. In many ways, by saying that these things aren't inclusive, they're saying, no, they want to exclude often the native people from engaging in their own cultural norms that they want to do. Now, provided they're not outright harming anybody, right? Provided they're not engaging in some weird kind of ritualistic animal slaughter, or again, they're sacrificing babies on the altar of Baal or Moloch, right? As long as they're not doing any of that stuff, then why is it wrong for them to want to have their customs and not want to include people who want to change and often eradicate those customs in the name of instituting their own customs, right? Colonization is only okay, obviously, when it's the reverse happening to how it was in the semi-recent past, isn't it? Colonization is perfectly fine as long as it's the global minority that's being further colonized and not the reverse, right? That's the way that it is. That's the way that it always is. In a section titled, How Can We Make the Countryside More Inclusive? The way they want to do it is by excluding the native people. That's what they want to do. They want to replace the native people and exclude them from their own land and from their own homes, right? They're doing the same thing with the farmers now. The government is doing the same thing with their farmers, with the ridiculous tax levies, which is just going to be a ludicrous power grab and land grab, which is all that it is. One went on to critique rural areas for not doing enough to cater to dietary norms that are rooted in religious or cultural practice, because it's not our culture and we should not be catering to it. It doesn't belong here anyway. It shouldn't be tolerated here anyway, right? All the mosques need to be shuttered, and you can make the argument. You can go down the route to make the argument for synagogues and whatever else if you want as well. That's outside of the scope of this discussion. But again, because we're talking about halal slaughter here, they're referencing particularly halal slaughter. They're not saying that the countryside needs to be made more kosher, right? They're not saying that. But I would argue personally that Islam is a far greater threat than any form of Judaism, personally, based on what I know. There's other people that obviously have different opinions from that, and if you happen to have a different opinion from that and want to leave it in the comments for me to have a look at, please do. But again, why should we be changing our practices for foreign customs, foreign religions, and foreign people? We shouldn't. That's correct. But again, this is the drive to make everything more inclusive is designed to only do one thing, and it's designed to exclude the native people. Especially when, ladies and gentlemen, this might be the Center for Hate Studies, this might be an example of one of the things that they are on about. They might be advocating, for example, more halal butchers or halal slaughter in the countryside, maybe in some of the rural towns like mine, right? However, this might be important for you to listen to, ladies and gentlemen, because someone's apparently put up on X, and I'll play the video for you in a moment, that two men who run a halal butchers, and we've talked about halal butchers before. Somebody actually left a comment on one of my talks about the Malik butchers, and apparently they go into it might have been Malik butchers in particular, because apparently they done good meat and stuff like that. Well, they might be the exception in this instance, because two quote-unquote men who run a halal butchers have now been sent to jail for selling meat meant for pets to humans in the butchers. And the good person rightfully asked the question, I wonder how many more halal butchers do this. So this is the video in question for you, coming on screen in a moment, ladies and gentlemen.
Two men have now been jailed for their roles in a startling conspiracy, selling meat originally meant for pet food, yes, including lamb's testicles, to unsuspecting customers. At the center of the scheme was 63-year-old Anthony Fear, who ran a company that supplied meat not fit for human consumption. He sold it to 40-year-old Azar Ishrad, who operated the cutting room down in South London. What was happening? Well, meat that should have been tossed out or used for pets, things like whole chickens and yes, those lamb's testicles, was instead being prepared as if it were normal meat for people to buy and eat. Back in 2020, residents living near a shop on Walworth Road, that's in SE17, started complaining about a terrible smell of rotting meat coming from what they called a disgustingly... Two men have now been jailed for...
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, you might have seen a short jump cut there because I realised I was talking and I forgot to unmute my mic. So, as I was saying, so you have there, allegedly, these two men have now been sent to jail for selling lamb's testicles and meat that was only fit for stuff like pets to the wider populace. And the thing I hate about when people post these videos, right, it's important to talk about, but the thing I hate when people post these videos is they don't put then the link to anything else to read about it, whether it be a news article or whether it be a police report or something like that to further substantiate it, right? I only have the video to go off of. But really, does this surprise me? No. No, because if you look at some of the other areas of the world where these people are from that run these butchers, they're not exactly known for being very sanitary. They're not exactly known for their food standards agencies and stuff like that, right? So again, does it surprise me? No. And especially when they understand that it's possible that a lot of especially the hyper empathetic libs are going to be coming in. They're not Muslims themselves, but they want to appear like they're trying to go with the inclusivity and diversity, supporting the religion, right? So they'll come in, they might buy meat from a halal butcher. Are they really going to care that it was meant for meat and it gets sold to somebody who they see as kafir? No, of course not. So this is not surprising whatsoever. It's just, again, support your local unless it's one of these guys, and we stop supporting them. Again, this is a large thing that happens. We've done it with big supermarkets, if they support like woke agendas and stuff like that. The only time they're going to listen is when people start voting with their wallets, voting with their money. When they start hurting their bottom line, that's the only time they're going to take notice, because that's when they're only going to get a signal then that people are not happy and it's something they're willing to die on. It's something they're willing to win the fiscal battle over. Then companies there to make money, supermarkets there to make money, whatever is there selling you something, either a service or an object, whatever it may be, for your money. They're there for your money. They're not there for your goodwill or anything like that. So it's only when they feel it in their bottom line, right? It's only when people make their voices heard with voting with their wallets that then the company's going to feel the pinch and actual change is going to come. So if you're gonna stand against this, it needs to be voting with the wallet, and that is largely going to come as well from again, in many areas that's not going to work because they've been outright ethnically cleansed in many ways. So again, in many areas where this might be quite small, you can probably snuff it out by not going there if you already are. Hope the situation doesn't get any bigger than what it actually is, but you might want to, again, think about this. If you have a lot of foreign takeaways in your town, if you have a lot of things like this, it's a good chance you might not be getting things that are fit for your consumption, and you should just have a little bit of suspicion about it. Should have a little bit of suspicion about it as well when, again, the colonizing forces now try to make the effort to appease the situation because they know the way that the tide is turning. I'm not going to say that everything associated with the way that the tide is turning is good, but at the end of the day, the way things are going, things in this country are going so drastically downhill, so fast, so extreme, that we do have to be careful in some ways. If you see the way that the political tide is turning now, there was the instance where the chief speaker of the Nationalist Socialist Network in Australia, Thomas Sowell, got up and gave a speech recently at a rally. I don't think he was actually meant to be there, but he did give up and speak. A lot of the things he was saying, the Australians, they're waving the flags, were cheering him on. And in fact, there was one video which, again, things like this, they resonate with a lot of people, even if you might disagree with the politics of the people involved. It's only a short video, which I'll bring up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. He was quoted as saying that basically Australia's become a dumping ground for the world, and we've become a halfway house for the rest of the world, I believe is the term that he used. So here's the video in question that I'm referring to, if I can bring it up, if I can play it now. Here we go. So the video, we'll bring the video up on screen for you in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just getting it ready. Speaking about immigration, whether you agree with the sentiments of true national socialism or anything like that, again, I think you only have to have a cursory look in history to understand that. Again, it's confusing what a lot of people say. There's a lot of historical revisionism going on at the moment, whether it be because the history we've been told is false and is a complete other history that we should have been told and had deliberately had facts kept from us, right? So whatever perspective you see it from, when people say things as plainly as this, you can't help but go, maybe he has a point. I'll bring it up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. Video coming on screen now.
Let's stop immigration so we can create a nation. We don't have a nation at the moment. We've got a halfway house for the world. We need to be a nation. Our people, Australians, we're a nation. We're a folk. And we need to keep it that way.
So the last thing he said, I cut the transition a little bit earlier, but he just says, again, we're a nation. He even used the term, we're a folk, right? And, but at the end of the day, when you wage war on people and you show that you're going to weaponize everything against them, you're going to weaponize even their own empathy and their own people against them, turn them with, socialist propaganda, do everything against what the Democratic voters stood for, everything they voted for, you're going to do the exact opposite. You don't blame people then for getting more and more extreme and rallying behind people like this, even if you don't agree with them. You should keep a watch out for things like this, though, ladies and gentlemen. When, again, the forces that were, working towards your suppression and working towards your imprisonment then try to turn it round, right? Such as people have rightfully pointed out, in my opinion, that now there's a lot of seeing the way that the political landscape is shifting, seeing that more and more people are waking up to what's going on and seeing the dangers of Islam, seeing the dangers of immigration, all of these things, right? People are now trying to be like, no, we've always supported this, and are now doing things like hanging the British flag outside mosques, right? Which, if this had never happened, if we just stayed asleep, if people had just stayed asleep and people hadn't committed to the truth, and you have people talking about rape gangs, you have people talking about what Islam actually teaches, all of these things. If you had Elon Musk, if you still had the Jack Dorsey areas of Twitter, Jack Dorsey era of Twitter, you probably wouldn't have seen anything like this. This never would have happened. Let's make no mistake about it. This never would have happened because these people are more loyal to their own people than they are to anything like the nation or anything like that. So again, it's like this. Muslims will be more loyal to their fellow Muslims than they will be to anyone else, right? There'll be, again, the natural tribal instinct of humans. Typically, it'll be religion first or people first, and either those two will be at the top: religion, then people, and then obviously then you have your nation, because the nation is just who the people make it up, right? If you were to get rid of all of the Welsh, Scottish, and English people and just replace them with Indians and Africans, you wouldn't have Britain anymore, because all the British people have gone. It'd be the same landmass, but the country would be completely different. You wouldn't know it as Great Britain because it would have nothing to do with the culture and the people that came before. So that's just a reality. That you don't have any hate in your heart for people when you say that. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. But now you have things like this image coming up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen, where, again, outside mosques and places like that, they'll try and claim this now as their flag and say, we always supported this, when, again, if the cultural tide hadn't turned and if the political tide hadn't turned, you never would have seen anything like this, because they've had plenty of time to do it. They've had plenty of time to express this sentiment, and they never have. They never have. In many instances, when you try to raise a flag now, like the Union Jack or especially the St. George's Cross or anything like that, you get outright attacked by police and called a racist and everything like that. So again, these people are doing it now as a way to try and save face, because they know the way the political landscape is changing. This is a Muslim centre on Borough Road in Birkenhead, said his leaders felt the perfect opportunity to affirm their allegiance to the country. Again, you'd be familiar with if you go on X at any point, you'd be familiar with the Islamic practice of taqiyya, where basically they can lie to further their aims. I would say that that's exactly what this is. Right, because as I said, they've had plenty of time to do this. If this was the case, you never would have had the ethno-religiously motivated rape gangs. You never would have had the outright takeover of our countries. You never would have had then them cheering on when signs are printed in Urdu, or when you have the native people being made a minority in 1 in 4 schools up and down the country. They cheer it on. It's only now that they've seen the political landscape changing as their tune is changing. They're hoping they can fool people into thinking that they're going to do whatever it takes to uphold the nation and be loyal to the nation and everything like that. No, this is our flag. But like, no. And the thing is, you had time. You had time to do this. And if this was actually true, you guys wouldn't have done the things that you've done, because you wouldn't try to usurp the culture. You wouldn't try to usurp the religion or anything like that. You wouldn't try to oppress the people. So again, it's just as simple as that. It's just as simple as that. We thought it was a strong and powerful response, or we thought a strong and powerful response would be to show that this is our flag and we are proud British Muslims. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. And to be honest, I don't think you should either. You should either. Because again, it presents a source of serious danger. If you enjoyed that clip, then make sure to go on over to the Voice of the Valleys X page at VOT_Valleys on X. We're also on Instagram at Voice of the Valleys. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Godspeed.